As a loophole for immigration visas is exposed in the latest revelation with regards to the crisis migrant crossings, we uncover and investigate why the UK is not a priority to the UK government and why the boats will not be stopping anytime soon. Welcome back to the channel, and thank you for joining me in yet another video at the channel that just gone viral. If you're new here, we like to cover news and crime, give analysis, and also tell you information that sometimes the mainstream media won't tell you. Our online store for the channel is now open, so go and check out for yourselves and go and grab some hoodies or t-shirts with some awesome slogans. So with that being said, please like, share, comment and subscribe, and let's get straight into the video. In this video, we bring you a news report where we investigated the secret agreement that will continue to see illegal migrants crossing on boats across the channel and where your taxpayers' money has and will continue to go. As President Zelensky and Keir Starmer signed a deal agreement 2 weeks ago that will see the UK sending defence money to Ukraine for the next 100 years, the citizens of the UK have now started to feel abandoned by their own Prime Minister with no one else to turn to. But what is the significance of Turkey's involvement in the illegal migrant dinghy crossing? Well, stay tuned and find out. As the government released news last week how it intends to crack down on illegal migrant parents who are sending their children alone across the Channel Sea to the UK are to face harder punishment, and how Gen Z could be called to service to fight in Ukraine. But to expose the spider's web, we have to look at the latest developments for the UK.
So, to my mind, it's vital that we maintain the integrity of NATO, and that means keeping the United States very greatly involved in the security of Europe. What we don't want to do is to have this row, and clearly it was a row, interfere with the long-term stability of NATO. That's a point that Mark Rutte, the Secretary General, was making yesterday. He'll be there at the summit too, as I understand it. He suggested that somehow President Zelensky should try and make it up with President Trump, and let's see whether that proves possible. I hope it does. I mean, I think what happened in the White House was wrong. I think it would have been far better if they'd had those discussions in private. Yes. And then if they wanted to get heated with each other, that necessarily wouldn't have helped President Putin. So, but I think it's ultimately very important that we maintain the integrity of NATO.
Now with Keir Starmer signing a new £3.1 billion agreement with Ukraine, the UK taxpayers' money will now be going to Romania to start work on the new NATO base there, which will house over 10,000 troops full-time and their families. The confirmation of this new NATO base in Romania comes as the cover-up and denial of a NATO base in Ukraine was proved true after the media and government denied it ever existed and that there were no NATO troops in Ukraine, when there clearly was. As you will hear for yourself, it seems that the government and the UK politicians are more concentrated and concerned about preventing and protecting NATO and its reputation rather than the UK's interests being its own country it is elected by and its people it's supposed to represent. Since the agreement Boris Johnson made with President Zelensky back in 2022, the UK is a well-known country for providing and selling weapons and arms across the world. This explained why Boris Johnson and his father Stanley were able to make a whopping £5.2 million in just 6 months from selling arms to Ukraine. Many will be unaware of the visit Boris Johnson made to Ukraine back in 2022, when he met Zelensky following an agreed ceasefire between Ukraine and Putin. Yet Boris instructed Zelensky that the war in Ukraine would not end until he said it does. This agreement also saw the UK donating billions of your UK taxpayers' money to Ukraine for what we were told were defence systems and arms. But the newly built and finished NATO base, just 9 miles from the border of Ukraine and Russia, speaks volumes. Turkey is a member of NATO, and with nearly 3/4 of the population being in the military or the country's defence, it has a secret contract with the UK behind closed doors, unknowingly to the public's knowledge. This agreement was known as the British Embassy Programme Fund, but since 2019 it ended, and a new programme started under the same conditions, but was named the FCDO, which stands for the Foreign Commonwealth Development Office. This programme is part of a deal where Turkish nationals are given £20,000 business grants that don't have to be paid back, while potential British business owners have to apply for a bank loan with added interest. When you understand the details of this arrangement and agreement between the UK and the Turkish government, and how Turkey, with one of the world's biggest armies, and the UK a weapons supplier, it is not hard to work out and figure out why Boris Johnson went to Ukraine in 2022 and allegedly told Zelensky to tear up the ceasefire that was already arranged and that the war wouldn't end until he said it did. Because as long as Turkey kept buying their weapons from the UK would still keep taking the migrants and giving the Turkish residents £20,000 business grants. With Keir Starmer now signing a 100-year agreement with Ukraine to fund defences and supply weapons, i.e. build the new NATO base, the cost of living crisis in the UK and for its citizens seems to have no end in sight. But the quality of living for Ukraine residents would be very interesting to discover. Apart from the parts that are engaged in war, I wonder if the residents of Ukraine are suffering with ridiculous electric bills or the rise in food prices at the expense of the UK taxpayer. I somehow doubt it.
So that guy there said he didn't pay, someone else did. He later said he didn't know how much or, how it was facilitated. So my big question is, who did pay? And how many of these thousands of young men from war-torn countries who are meant to be poor managing to get hold of £5,000, £6,000, £7,000 together to pay smuggling gangs? Are any of them paying? How do they get the money? Because this is industrial-level people smuggling going on, yet it appears these guys have access to more money than most normal Brits do. Very bizarre. And it appears they also have access to much better local services too. One of the biggest gripes in Wethersfield is the poor bus service for villagers who basically have no public transport at all because current provisions are so bad. Migrants, however, at the RAF base have been bussed in and out of the site all day, every day.
And if that all wasn't enough to make you want to leave the country for Ukraine yourself, then the domino effect of the Turkish and UK weapons supply agreement just might. The ever-consistent flow of 18 to 13 years of age, men of fighting age, and the lack of women and children is becoming more and more noticeable. The image of the fleeing illegal immigrant from a war-torn country is now diminishing by the second, as it is exposed that while most portray themselves as poor and vulnerable, many, if not all, have the latest phones, nice clothes, and most of all, more money than you and I. With claims now that the illegal migrants, even from themselves, that they have not funded the money for the crossing or the trip, and if any at all, leaves two questions. Are these migrants being funded by an organisation that we are not being told about, or that the smuggling gang is nothing more than a myth, and the only people smuggling people into this country illegally is our own RNLI and Border Force? This claim and allegation is not so far-fetched and stupid as it sounds, when you take cases like the dinghy boat that was full of illegal migrants that was stranded just 1.3 miles off the coast of Calais, only for the UK Border Force, who travelled nearly 19 miles across the Channel Sea, to then bring them back into the UK illegally. When we turn our attention to the ever-growing illegal migrant boat crossings and the crisis that, despite several cockamamie schemes portrayed to the British public by the government to send illegal migrants to Rwanda or neighbouring countries to be processed, has produced nothing to date, and there is a good reason why it still won't, so stay with me. We are told that these men are from Afghanistan, Iraq, Iran and Turkey, but what they fail to tell the public, that they might not know about, is that these people come from these countries, but they are not nationals. They are Kurdish, or Kurds, a tribe of people from 4 of the countries that I've just mentioned. So although they come from these countries, they are not who the media tell you they are. Being someone from a barber background since I was 11 years old, and seeing the industry change over the past 20 years in the UK, I feel confident enough from my own experience and what I have witnessed to pass on what I have seen and encountered. I have worked with genuine Turkish people and Arabs in the barber industry. One Turkish barber shop had Kurds who lived in the flat above the shop. When I questioned as to why none of the Turkish barbers spoke to or even said hello to the Kurdish as they would pass them on their way out the back of the shop for a cigarette break, one replied, "We don't like them. They are like travellers in our country that don't belong there." Maybe this would answer why the countries named out of the 4 that I mentioned earlier have taken in none of the migrants yet to date. This could only explain the sudden rise of over a 50% increase in Turkish barbershops and kebab shops in the UK, while the British barbershops and British-owned businesses perish and dissolve.
A couple of years ago, I said to you, I couldn't believe the explosion of Turkish barbershops, just that most of them weren't Turkish. Most of them turned out, when I did some investigation, to be Albanian. But whatever, an exploding number of barbers on our high streets. And I asked you to email in, had you seen a big increase in barbers in your area? The results were astonishing. Hundreds of you got in touch to say, our town had 2 barbers a year ago, now it's got 4 or 5 or 6. Well, the official figures are there are now 18,000 barbershops in the country, a 50% increase since 2018.
Although Nigel states that these are owned by Albanians and run by Albanians, I've never seen an Albanian in a Turkish barber's in my life, but I have seen Kurds. I hope you enjoyed the video and the content, and it gave you a simple breakdown of exactly what the situation is and what's going on, when the government and media will bombard you with word salads and confusion. Smash the like button if you enjoyed the content, and if you haven't already, smash subscribe. Take care of yourselves and each other, and I'll see you in the next video.